All right. Thank you so much for joining us today as we talk about Pivot Hearing's trademarked hearing aid test drive. I'm Chelsea Treseder with Pivot Hearing. For those of you who aren't familiar with Pivot Hearing, we are the leading practice development services group, and we exist to help hearing care professionals grow their practices with fresh, relevant mentoring and execution. Our team is composed of audiologists, hearing instrument specialists, and business people. And our work is based on the real world success we have in our own multi-location practice here in the North Bay area of San Francisco, along with the hundreds of other practices we work with across the US and in Canada. Today's presentation will be delivered by 3 members of the Pivot Hearing team: Bill Dials, audiologist and owner of Kenwood Hearing Centers and founder of Pivot Hearing; Adam Jasa, hearing instrument specialist and practice consultant with Pivot Hearing; and Will Dials, hearing instrument specialist and practice consultant with Pivot Hearing. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. As we go, please feel free to drop any questions or comments in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom interface, and we'll make sure to leave plenty of time at the end to answer those. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Will Dials.
Okay, thanks, Chelsea. And thanks everybody for joining us today. So today we're going to talk about this concept of the hearing aid test drive, how it works in practice, and also how it addresses many of the key issues and struggles, that those of us in private practice are currently dealing with. So specifically, we'll be talking about how implementing the hearing aid test drive in your practice can help address some key market forces that many of us are dealing with, the changing patient demographics, the fact that it can reinforce patient loyalty and generate more patient referrals, improve tested not sold or tested not treated rates, as well as delivering new patients through creative marketing concepts, and all while at the same time improving the financial position of your practice. Okay, so I think it's probably an understatement to say that the world looks radically different from the way it was just a few years ago. There isn't likely a single person listening to this who hasn't been dramatically impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Particularly in the early days, when many of our practices were forced to close our doors or severely limit our operations. It's not entirely clear at this point what the long-term impacts from COVID are on the industry or private practice specifically, but it certainly has been extremely disruptive. Another big change is the growth in managed care, which we've seen in recent years, and particularly in some markets where it's become extremely saturated. We should expect that more and more patients will be coming into our offices with some sort of hearing aid coverage, which is oftentimes through a managed care hearing plan. So we need to be prepared to address this issue by offering a compelling reason for patients to do business or deal with us directly. The hearing aid test drive is one way to convey that message very clearly to patients. And while it's not a particularly new phenomenon, but the big box segment of the hearing aid market continues to grow at a pace that's faster than that of the market as a whole. So many of us have been dealing with this challenge for years, but it's something to certainly be aware of. Lower and lower price points that we're seeing from these outlets, along with some increasingly competitive technology, it makes it really important for us to provide a differentiated experience to patients, who might otherwise consider a big box store purchase for their hearing care. And of course, online sales is another thing to keep an eye on. That's also not a new phenomenon, but it is something that appears to be growing. More and more places reaching patients with an online presence and offering a direct consumer purchasing option there for certain patients that might be interested in that. And there's been a lot happening on the legislative front in recent years. So one of these days we can expect the FDA to provide the regulatory guidelines for these OTC devices that are coming, but it's a safe bet to say that we'll probably see these devices on the market in the very near future. And the Medicare situation is very murky at this point, but it's possible and probably even likely, based on some of the conversations we've had, that Medicare will be offering some sort of hearing aid coverage in the future. So again, the details are really unclear, but we certainly need to keep an eye on it as we move forward. Okay, so and just a few other headwinds that are out there that are worth mentioning. The market is more cluttered, noisy, and competitive than it ever has been. As we discussed just a second ago, there's big box, there's manufacturer-owned retail, online, and other direct-to-consumer options. So practices must differentiate themselves in a clear and compelling way to stand out and attract new patients. So patient acquisition costs are extremely high and growing. So traditional marketing, as you know, most of us in private practice know, is not working as effectively as it used to. So when you do get a qualified patient in the door from some sort of marketing effort, you really don't want to take a chance of missing out on that opportunity, given the cost to bring them in the door. And many of the issues that we've discussed already, from managed care and other competitive threats, they all have a bit of a common theme, which is downward pressure on retail price, lower price points available to consumers, something that we have to grapple with in the private practice setting. And another very important consideration to be aware of is the type of patients that are coming through our doors and how they are different from patients in previous eras. So today's patients are more active and are a little bit harder, to meet their expectations. They are also highly inquisitive and will likely have done some research before making an appointment, both on the product and technology side, but also on the insurance side of things. So how their insurance may or may not participate in the purchase. So the patient coming in is just a little bit different than in previous eras. Baby boomers do not recognize medical authority, quite like previous generations have. And they will certainly do their due diligence before making any sort of healthcare decision. So a strong recommendation from an audiologist or a hearing instrument specialist is not likely to be persuasive with these patients. So they want to participate in the decision-making process, which the hearing aid test drive completely allows for that to happen. It's really hard also to know what a patient's needs are within the first hour, that initial consult appointment. So the hearing aid test drive allows for ample time for the patient and the provider to work collaboratively in a way that finds the best solution for the patient. Okay, and with that, I am now going to pass this over to Bill. Bear with me 1 second here while we do that.
Okay, thanks, Will. So I have a mentor. I've been very fortunate to get to know this fella named Bill also. And he's from my town here where I live in Petaluma, California. And he and a buddy went up to Reno in 1971 and bought a little restaurant called the Pepper Mill. And today he owns 6 casinos and he has 5,300 employees. So he's probably, I'm sure he's the best businessman I've ever met. And he's just given me lots of advice. And some of the things he said to me over the years have really stuck. He said, there's no comfort zone in business. I think that's so interesting. I think about that almost every day. He said one time, if you run your business today like you did yesterday, you might not be around tomorrow. Or he says, if owning a business were easy, everybody would have one, right? But my favorite thing that he said to me, and I just love it, he says that he lives in positive fear. So he's a positive guy, but he calls himself a realist. He says, I'm pretty positive I can stay one step ahead of that train that's going to run me over if I take my eye off the ball. So I think we all know what happens when companies lose sight of the customer, right? If you think about Blockbuster, I think they forgot what they were selling. They thought they were just in the business of selling or renting DVDs, but they were really selling and providing convenient entertainment, and Netflix had a much better idea. So this is kind of a reminder to us that we need to put the customer first, or in our case, the patient first. And the patient needs to be in the center of our process, because we have to remember what we're selling. We're selling better hearing, not a widget. So trying to advance it here. There we go. The test drive, for me, actually started back in the 90s. Some of you may have been around long enough, like I have been, to remember when our manufacturers came out with some real superior products. There was a big leap in technology, a big jump. And I'm talking about the early days of Resound back in the 90s, where they couldn't even keep up with the demand, right? And Oticon came out with, about the same time they came out with multifocus. And this is an ad that we ran back in, I think it was 94. This was a full page ad, and I remember we had 200 appointments off of this. And we just wanted to get this technology on people. Soon after multifocus came, the digifocus, and Widex had come out with the Widex Senso. These were big improvements. And even though the prices to the consumers jumped, we realized they were willing to pay this because they were getting the benefits. So we knew all we had to do was get these products on the patients, and they were such an improvement over what they'd been wearing that they were highly likely to purchase. I have a chart here demonstrating, this is kind of interesting. It goes back to 1997. So this is how business used to go. You go along, and then there'd be a new product. Like I'm thinking in 2001, that might have been Adapto. I think that was the Oticon Adapto. Then we had a big jump, and then it kind of flattens out again. There'd be a new product. Maybe that was Synchro or something. We were doing a lot of Oticon time. But with each new technology, we would see a pop in business. So all we had to do in those days was kind of sit back, wait for the manufacturers to come out with something and advertise, and there we go. But things started slipping, as you can see, after 2008. That strategy wasn't cutting it for us, so we needed to make a change. And I was always impatient. I wanted to fit these people right away. As soon as they came in the door, I wanted to get hearing aids on people, but we didn't have any demos, and it was a very expensive way of doing business. Because you know how it goes. Sometimes you fit hearing aids, and we'll see you back in a week. You make your appointment. Then next thing you know, somebody goes to the hospital, or unexpected events come up, and you haven't seen the patient in 3 weeks, and now the invoice is getting old, and it's caused a real strain on our business. But we continued to do it because it was so effective. We were fitting more people successfully. It was just really tough on the cash flow. But along came in 2001 the Unitron Flex trial, and wow, that was a real game changer for us. It kind of helped us perfect the test drive. And not only were we able to let people listen to hearing aids and go home with them, they could try different technology levels within the same device. And I think it's great that a number of manufacturers have followed suit. Right, so that's available with other products besides Unitron. But I love this because it was just really comfortable. We didn't have the financial pressure. And the patient would say, "Are you going to let me just walk out of here with no money down?" And we say, "Sure." So we're trying to gain the patient's trust, but what we've done is shown the patients that we really trust them. So here we have a patient benefit, because they get to try hearing aids at home and different technology levels, and a business benefit that we could put as many of these on as we wanted to and not have the pressure of overdue invoices. So this is not a new concept, right? I talk to lots of practices, and they say, "Oh, we do this. We let people test drive hearing aids." I said, "Oh, well, that's interesting, because I was on your website and I didn't see that anywhere on your website." And when I go to a lot of websites, I see something like this, a 2-week free trial. Well, I don't think this message is going to really separate you from your competitors, right? That's not a really great offer. I think consumers pretty much know they have a 30-day trial, and in California, it's even 45 days by law. So, I think I like to see a little stronger message. Yes, they like it in clinic, but what about people that are searching your website and figuring out where they want to go for hearing improvement? So we learned through the hearing aid test drive that it was really popular when the patients were in the office, and that did get us thinking about our marketing. It's like, how can we let our the community at large, know that this is our process? We need to make this a central part of our marketing, and here in just a few minutes, Adam's going to discuss this. But we like this because now we're advertising us. We're advertising Kenwood Hearing Centers. We're not advertising a Lyric or an Oticon or a Starkey. So we're known as the place that doesn't just sell a hearing aid, but rather a place that finds your optimal hearing solution. Today's consumer, I think they're just more aware of choices, and they don't really want to be sold just one brand. They want choice. And they love the fact that we're independent and brand neutral. And something else to consider, it's kind of a good defense against third parties. We've had people walk in with a Medicare Advantage plan and they're actually carrying one of our ads and they say, I want to take a test drive. And I said, well, that's for people who are purchasing, through us. But it makes the patient oftentimes more reluctant to just pick a hearing aid from a list. And we've found that it can be a defense against Costco, where someone would say, hey, I can just go to Costco, and I can answer, well, sure, that's fine, but how do you know you're finding the optimal solution for your hearing and your brain, as we've explained that you hear with your brain? So what makes this test drive different than just the standard trial that people say they do? Because, we're all well-trained professionals. We have great products and clinical tools, but how can we know that we're fitting the best solution for a patient whom we've only known for an hour? There's a missing element. We feel confident on the first visit that we've dialed things in, but there's so many unknowns, right? On the follow-up visit, you hear things like, well, my wife says I'm still not hearing, or I couldn't hear the pastor at church last Sunday, or even sometimes it's like, I can't stand that switch. I can't even feel it, or I'm bumping it accidentally, or that app that you put on my phone, that's so confusing. These are all things that we can never really determine to be a problem on the initial visit, right? So as someone's leaving the office for the first time, have we really found the optimal solution, even though we've tried our best to verify that? Well, obviously not, because even with all of our clinical techniques, with speech and noise and real ear measurements and whatever else we're doing to verify and adjust for preference, it could be that we're just on the wrong horse and that we need to go with another manufacturer who has a different strategy for delivering sound to the brain. So we need to stay open-minded, and we need to realize that we've only known this patient for an hour. So again, we can be kind of humble. This just may not be the optimal solution here on the first visit. So the good news is, if you're independent, manufacturer agnostic, you can switch horses, go a different direction. So yes, this fitting process can take a few extra weeks, and yeah, it's more work. And I came up with a silver bullet. I like to say I found the silver bullet to this industry, and it's called hard work. Right? But our patients are spending thousands of dollars. I think about this a lot. How often do we go out and spend thousands of dollars, right? It's kind of a rare occurrence for us. So I think these patients that are in our office, they deserve that extra effort. And at the end of the journey, the patient's going to feel more confident of his or her decision because there's been a collaboration and trust has been built. So an objection I hear a lot from practice owners goes like this: I'm not going to fit a patient. Let them walk out the door with no money down. They have to have some skin in the game, right? We hear that. I want them to be committed. And I have a little different take on this, because from what we're told, the typical patient waits 7 years before taking the first step to better hearing. And now they're sitting across from you. If they're in your office, I think that's plenty of skin, right? Here they are. Do we really want that patient walking out without hearing aids because they're not comfortable? They're not comfortable enough to make that decision on the first visit. We hear lots of talk in our industry about best practices, and I'm often left wondering just exactly what are best practices. Most seem to say something like real ear measurements or speech and noise testing. I checked out the ASHA guidelines for their list of best practices, and here are some things I didn't see on the list. How about being available for same-day emergency appointments, being available on a weekend, having a healthy inventory of loaner devices? Because going without hearing for a week while waiting for a repair, that's not good care. I don't think that's a best practice. What about providing a technician who will go to the home and hook up a TV device, a Bluetooth TV device? So what are best practices? I think we all answer that question a little differently. But how about this best practice? Being independent and manufacturer agnostic, allowing patients to experience different levels of technology from different manufacturers before making this significant investment. I think that's a best practice. It's patient-provider collaboration. That's a best practice. So one of my favorite persuasion techniques is called the Unsell. And when I say persuasion, I don't mean persuading someone to buy a hearing aid. I just want to persuade that patient to take the next step. And so, did you ever sit down with a patient like after an audiogram and make your strong recommendation only to hear the patient say, well, that's interesting, but I need to go home and discuss this with my spouse, or I want to go do some research. Well, oh, great. Well, now they're leaving your office armed with your recommendation, and they go online and they get confused, and they're sitting at home on their computer researching, and if you could just talk to them again and explain why the things they're looking at are not really going to cause them to be satisfied. But a lot of times you don't get that chance. They've come to your office, they've left, now they're back out and getting more confused in this noisy market. And we all know that neighbor who's whispering in their ear, telling them to go to Costco because of all the money they can save, but they're not really considering the quality of care that their neighbor's going to get. So I like this concept. It's called a series of small yeses. And it goes like this. So this is what I will do. I'll bring someone in after we've done the audiogram. I pull up the audiogram on the screen, explain their hearing loss to them. And I say something like this, like, I've got 45 minutes on my schedule here. Do you have some time? And almost always they'll say yes. So that's your first yes. Then I say, how about if I grab some demo devices and we can listen to some music and visit a little bit, and you can experience, some hearing improvement right here in the office and just get an idea what they sound like. Well, 99% of the time you get your second yes. Then I say, well, after a little time and they're settled in, would you like to take these home for a week and just see if you're even ready, and the unsell part comes where, let's just find out if you're ready. That's what this first week's about. You can see how you do with your family, and you can just bring them back in a bag to me next week if you want and come back a year later. Just kind of unselling the whole thing, just slowing the process down. So instead of asking them to make this big decision, I think that's really difficult. Just ask for this series of little yeses and start building the relationship. And so that's how it goes in clinic with the hearing aid test drive. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Adam now.
All right, guys. So I'm going to get started on some of the most important aspects and patient benefits of the hearing aid test drive. So number one, there's no pressure at all. Really hard for people to say no to a totally risk-free test drive. So not only does it put less pressure on the patient that's coming in, but really from the provider side too, there's no pressure to, make a sale. I think it's really important because it sets up that entire interaction to be really easy for everybody involved. And you're always having that patient's best interest at heart. Super easy to get started. So very easy for the patient to get started with amplification. They're only agreeing to give hearing aids a try. And it tends to be way easier than, new patients ever anticipated to be. I always get comments like that, like, wow, that was easy. Why did I wait 7 years for that? It's also easy for the practice to get started. We utilize demo hearing aids. We help get demos for all our Pivot members. So that's the easiest way to run this. As Bill mentioned, it establishes trust. So we typically aren't asking for deposits or commitments from the patient to get started. And it's funny because after these fittings, almost everybody's like, well, what do I need to do? What do I need to sign, or how much do I need to put down? And we just say, hey, don't even worry about it. Let's just see how you do here. People are really impressed by that. So we're putting our trust in that patient, and then in turn, they're going to put their trust in us. So easy way to build trust with people that you just met, 30 minutes ago. Empowers the patient and inspires confidence in their decision. So patients really feel like they're part of this decision-making process. And I think this is more and more important with these baby boomers. So the only strong recommendation we're typically making is the recommendation of amplification in general. So because of this, you're going to process close to zero returns because people are only, purchasing, committing once they've been wearing the hearing aids. They know exactly what they're getting into. And all of this, in our opinion, it leads to better hearing aid outcomes and increased patient satisfaction. So in addition to, training and supporting providers and practices on how to run this hearing aid test drive, we've created all the marketing materials around it that you can use as a tool to also get patients in the door. So I'm sure a lot of you are watching this and, so far you're thinking, well, I do all this stuff, but I can tell you from talking to literally hundreds of practices all over North America, we never come across practices that have really created marketing and are kind of messaging this to the public and their network in a real effective way. So to the right here, we have one of our test drive ads. This is one of our originals that we created years ago. I'm just going to read the 3 steps here. Make an appointment for an initial hearing evaluation. Take home a state-of-the-art hearing aid with no commitment or deposit required. Take your time evaluating which hearing aid suits you best. So as you'll see there's some bold language. There's no limitations as far as trial dates, 7 days, 14 days, what have you. So we were pretty bold with this. And when we first came up with this and we were thinking about putting this out there, we had a lot of concerns, of course, because it was just so kind of open-ended. And we thought, well, aren't patients, going to maybe take off with our hearing aids, or are people going to see this and feel like they just kind of call the shots, and are they ever going to make a decision? Or aren't, being the professional, aren't we supposed to make that strong recommendation? And I can tell you from us running these messages for years and all of our Pivot members all over the place, the issues that we've had have been extremely rare. In our practice, and we've done thousands of test drives, I can't even think of one instance where we know that somebody purposely ripped us off. So it really just doesn't happen. And this is kind of across the board. Some people think, oh, well, you guys are in California, that's different. And I mean, sure, there's differences out there, but at the end of the day, I think patients are people, of course, and I wouldn't worry about some of these concerns. So Will's going to talk a little bit more about the kind of practice concern side of it. But all of these ideas, they're tested. They're not brand new things that we haven't used ourselves. They're all proven to resonate with prospective patients. And when you start putting this kind of information out there, people will call in and they'll just say, hey, I've been seeing your guys' stuff around and I just would like to do that test drive. So that's a totally different conversation than before we did this. We did a lot of product advertising and people would call in and just say, hey, how much does it cost? So you won't really get that. It's going to make whoever's answering the phone, it'll make their job a lot easier to schedule appointments. And when people start going through this process, they're going to leave really good patient reviews. So this is a nice example out of hundreds that we have. But it says, every person I met during my experience at Kenwood Hearing Center was extremely pleasant, patient, and professional. I tried out several hearing aids before deciding on one, and the result has been a positive, life-changing experience. I highly recommend this company. So once you start doing this and you get reviews where people actually take the time to discuss the process that you went through and they realize, wow, that's a lot different than, the other place I went to, or that must be different than what Costco does. You'll see that this whole process just kind of snowballs on itself. And, the success just kind of grows from there. And that, of course, gives you more referrals. So once adopted, I think the hearing aid test drive becomes one of the most critical elements in your practice value proposition, the most important differentiator from all your competitors. And it's really the central communication of all of your marketing. So we tend to put this everywhere. We recommend our members do the same, on the website, like Google ads. We have tons of different print ads with interesting concepts. You can do it on Facebook, and the list goes on. You put it all over the place. So I'm going to get into a little bit of just the nuts and bolts on kind of how we recommend people run this, how we actually do it in our practice. The first initial appointment, we do a lot. Typically, we schedule 90 minutes for this appointment. And that includes the patient intake, doing the hearing test, going over that, recommending something, fitting the hearing aids, and then instructions on, what they need to know. So all of that's done in that first appointment. I think that's really important. You want to get those hearing aids fit as fast as possible. We talked to a lot of people who will do kind of a test and consult initially and then schedule them for a fitting later on. And I think if you do that, the potential of you losing a lot of people in that wait time is really going to go up. So a key point in that initial appointment is we recommend not spending too much time talking before you get the hearing aids in. So obviously you want to be pleasant and get to know somebody a little bit, but I would get them in that hearing test almost right away once you kind of know what you're working with. And then try to get them to agree to trying hearing aids in the office. So once the hearing aids are on, then you can spend all the time you want going over all their questions. So you get the benefit of not only them getting the information they need, but also experiencing the amplification right on the spot there. So it's a much more efficient use of your time, and it's getting them towards that goal of hearing better. So the first appointment, the recommendation is just for amplification in general. So we're not usually recommending like a real strong specific product. And in this kind of protocol, I'm gearing this towards a little bit more like a new patient to your practice, but this sort of version of this is applicable to anything, your existing patients, existing users, all of those kinds of things. So initial appointment, overall goal, you just want to focus not on making a sale or anything like that, but really just getting the patient started wearing hearing aids. That's pretty much it. So to me, that makes it very easy. That's like my goal. Everything I'm doing in that appointment is focused on that goal. I don't really worry about anything else. So, you're going to get tons of questions, of course. These are some of the most common ones that people get. And I just want to highlight how easy they are to answer with the test drive. So do I really need hearing aids yet? I mean, everybody's hoping the answer is no, I guess. But, according to your hearing tests, yes, you would benefit from hearing aids. But the only way you'll really know is by giving them a try. Very simple. How do I know which hearing aid is right for me? This is a great question. And we actually put it in our first ever hearing aid test drive ad that we created. The answer is very simple. The only way to really know is to experience the benefits in your day-to-day life. How much do they cost? We typically like to, quote with ranges initially, so you don't get too deep in the weeds on the price thing. So we say there's a wide ranges. They start down here and they can go up to here. So we have options for all hearing losses, all budgets, but we really won't know what you need until you try something. So when you come back for your follow-up appointment, we'll check your insurance. I'll be able to give you more specific numbers. But initially, I just recommend we focus on the hearing first, and we'll figure out what works. Which hearing aid do you recommend? I'm recommending you start with this trial set based off the results from your hearing test. You have to understand this hearing test is just a starting point because everybody's hearing is totally unique. So we're not going to know exactly what to recommend until you've worn those devices in your different environments. And you come back, you let us know how it's all going. So that's what gives us the ability to fine tune them specifically to you and figure out which hearing aid works best with your brain. And what if I try the hearing aids and don't want to buy them? What if this doesn't work out? Hey, if for whatever reason it doesn't work out, just bring the hearing aids back. We can start up again whenever you're ready. So the way I see it is when you present things this way, the process, it's so consultative, so patient-centered. If you go through all this and somebody decides not to move forward, they don't even want to try hearing aids for free at no risk, then hey, then that's fine. You've tried to do everything you can, make it easy for them. You're not going to get everybody, but at least you can rest easy and know, hey, you tried to do everything you could. So even with this process, you're not going to get every single person, but what you will get for sure is you're going to put more hearing aids on people. And you're going to get a higher fitting ratio. It's going to lead to more business, and it's going to lead to more happy patients, which is exactly what everybody's looking for. So, in helping providers explain the whole process and also having this make sense to patients, we've created a patient counseling tool. A lot of people like to use this, and it covers different topics like ear anatomy and hearing loss, of course, how you hear with your brain, cognitive decline, comparing it to vision loss, which I think is always really effective, and of course, the hearing aid test drive. So a little bit more just as far as like kind of patient communication and sales fitting techniques. I think it's really important to, before you're done with that first initial appointment, to really set up the follow-up appointment. So I like to think of the follow-up as part of the whole fitting process, so you can kind of drop some information to patients so they can be sure that they're coming back to continue that test drive. So if something goes wrong, they have a bad week, whatever, they're not thinking, oh, well, that failed. And they just bring the hearing aids back in a bag and say, this didn't work. You want them to think that, maybe this isn't going to be perfect right out of the gates. We don't know exactly how to adjust those hearing aids until you've worn them. You give them a try and you come back and let us know how it's going. The great thing at the follow-up is that we're going to ask you how it went. We'll go over this data logging. That's going to allow me to fine tune those hearing aids. And we might even try a different option for you to compare. So, keep that in mind. The follow-up appointment is really exciting because we really get to know about you and your unique hearing. And we can go ahead and use that information to adjust those hearing aids specifically to you. And I'll also say things like, hey, you're not making any decisions. Even when you come back, if you love these hearing aids, I'm most likely going to have you try another option just so you can compare. Because even if these are fantastic, if you don't have anything to compare them to, how do we know that another option, might not be even better for you? So that's kind of taking an additional step. I love doing it. And it's not for everybody. I talked to some providers who are like, now hold it. If I fit some hearing aids and somebody comes back and they love them, I want to wrap that sale up and move on with it. And that's totally fine. You can do that. But I like taking that extra step. I've been burned on a few of those processes where somebody came back, 3 months down the road and said, well, my friend has, White X or whatever, and why didn't I try that? Or these aren't working for me as well as they did the first day. So I like to cover myself. And, when people come back, hey, these are going really well. That is wonderful. We have a great report. Now I want to try you to try something else so we can compare. So when you do that, you get a patient who literally is ready to pay for the hearing aids, and you, as what they are thinking, is, health professional / salesperson, you're like, now hold it. No, you're not going to pay for these yet. I want to take a little bit more time. I want to make sure that this is done right. I want to make sure that you get the best option for you. When you do that, a patient's, they're going to be blown away. Now you have all the trust in the world. When you finish the process, they're completely committed to whatever they're doing. They're never going to return. So I like really doing that, but not for everybody. So that's pretty much the first appointment. That's the most important thing. And then, from that point on, you schedule a follow-up appointment. I recommend 3 to 7 days out. You really don't want to go over 7 days unless like somebody's schedule just won't allow anything else. You don't want to give them too long. And then you continue this process until you found the best hearing aid at a price they can afford. On average, it's usually 2 to 4 weeks time. And then from that point, just regular, we do 6-month cleaning checks and all your necessary testing adjustments ongoing. So that's kind of the patient experience. Now I'm going to hand it over to Will Dials.
Great. Thanks, Adam. Okay. Yeah. So we work with, lots of practices across the US and Canada. So we've heard all sorts of different objections over the years to, embracing the concept of the hearing aid test drive. So a real common concern is the delay in cash collection. And this is true if you're sending people out the door without requiring any deposit or payment. But the key takeaway here is that you're going to make more sales over time than you otherwise would, which will completely overwhelm any sort of cash delays you might experience initially. You're also a lot less likely to process a return, as was discussed earlier, because the patient had the opportunity to really experience the technology before making the decision. And if there is any delay with cash collection, it's really only going to be temporary, because if you go all in with the hearing aid test drive, you will have, many people at any given time in trial with devices. So initially, yeah, maybe you might see a little delay in cash collection, but once you have, many patients who are out trying hearing aids, your sales will become more even and predictable. Another common thing we hear is that, being fearful that patients will run off with devices. And yeah, as we discussed, this just really doesn't happen. I actually have seen it one time in my 11 years in the business. And so, one out of several thousand patients, those are numbers that you can totally live with. And any potential risk you are taking on a patient by patient basis is completely offset by the goodwill that you are establishing with, all the other patients who didn't rip you off. Another one we hear a lot, as also was discussed earlier, was the skin in the game argument. If they're not making any sort of a deposit or paying up front, are they really, invested in the process? And yeah, we just don't really buy this argument. If they're there, if they've made the decision to come in and they're having a conversation and willing to try hearing aids, that is, in our book, that is skin in the game. Okay, so the inventory issue is obviously a concern if you're not, doing business this way currently. So if you're going to make the move and really embrace the test drive, you're going to need demos, because doing this with invoiced hearing aids is not financially, reasonable. So Pivot can help with this. The manufacturers that we work with understand that the hearing aid test drive is a core part of what we do at Pivot, and are receptive and are willing to help you get the demos that you need to put this into practice inside of your practice. So we can help make it happen. And then technology has made this much easier with flex trial devices and other upgradable, devices from various manufacturers. That dramatically reduces the number of units that you need to have on hand to really, let people try different devices or different technology levels. And so, yeah, we also hear the argument that this sounds like a lot of work, more time than people are otherwise spending with hearing aid fittings. And that's true. But yeah, the investment that these patients are making is substantial. So we think that any additional time and work that's put into this is completely worth it. And it also kind of eliminates some of the less pleasant parts of the job, which is, more of the selling process. So when you go through this process, there really isn't much of that, because the patients are experiencing the technology. And so if there's a little more work, it's not a problem, because it's more enjoyable, and that awkward part of selling is completely removed. Okay. So let's talk about some of the business benefits of the hearing aid test drive. So prospect retention is a big one. When someone goes through a hearing aid test drive and doesn't buy for whatever reason, they likely had a good experience based on all the things we've talked about today. So when they are ready to pursue hearing aids, they're likely to come back to you. And so, so the positive experience of the test drive, and, the knowledge that they're not going to be pressured, they know that they're going to have a good experience when they decide to come back. It, as you've seen, provides you with a really unique marketing message. So this message around the test drive really resonates with consumers. And when you market the test drive, you're likely, putting out a very different message from what your competition is doing. So it helps you kind of differentiate in that regard. Increased ASP is a nice benefit. When you instill trust in patients and, give them time to make their decision, they tend to buy the hearing aid that they need. So they get the chance to hear what premium devices really have to offer. And that kind of makes the choice, once they've had the time to experience the benefits, an easy one for them. So we generally see when practices, embrace the test drive, they see a nice increase in their average selling price. Cash flow improvements are great, obviously. So when you use manufacturer demos, as you're doing these trials, you're not ordering hearing aids and having invoices that are aging that need to be paid. So when you do, the patient does go through the test drive, you order the hearing aid, they come in and pay. That really helps from a cash flow perspective, because you're not really incurring that cost of that hearing aid until the patient's decided to buy. And with very few returns, As a result of this, that also helps with cash flow. So you're not having to, constantly have money coming in and out of your bank account, depending on how patients are doing with their trial periods. Yeah, and so the reviews that you generate and the referrals, patient referrals that are generated by when you embrace the test drive are really nice as well. So patients really prefer this method in our experience and our practice, and seeing it, with many others. And so that's why you end up seeing those nice reviews and them telling their friends and family, where they recommend going for hearing care. Okay, so now let's take a look at a few examples of kind of some real world data of how the hearing aid test drive has had an impact on practices. So you all saw a version of this data a few slides back, and this is just taking a look at the Kenwood Hearing Center sales data from 1997 through 2021. So just more complete picture from what you saw earlier. And 2011 was our low point, as Bill mentioned earlier. The product ads weren't working as well as they did historically, and our sales were a bit stagnant and declining. And so, so in 2011, we decided to really embrace the concept of the hearing aid test drive, and the rest is history here. And there are some other reasons that could possibly explain some of the success that we've enjoyed, but the hearing aid test drive is the single biggest game changer that really revitalized our organization. And as you can see, we took quite a hit in 2020 with COVID, just like a lot of practices, but we are now thankfully back on track. Okay, and this is an example of a practice that we work with. We've been working with him for about 4 years, and he's really, he's all in on the hearing aid test drive. And over the past few years, he has just seen a nice increase in his average selling price. And this is particularly impressive, given that many practices out there have actually seen an opposite trend in ASP. So he attributes this nice growth to the hearing aid test drive. So when patients have the ability to try the hearing aids before making the purchase decision, they oftentimes end up in premium devices because they can kind of have the time to sell themselves on the benefits of those premium devices and technology during the test drive process. Okay, and another example, and I really like this one. So this is taking a look at the sales performance of a relatively new AUD grad who started working for one of our Pivot Hearing members in 2018. So as some of you listening may be aware, recent grads right out of school sometimes do not have the confidence or skills to be effective at selling hearing aids, which in the private practice setting is obviously extremely important. And in this case, you can see that she struggled a bit in her first year on the job. So we flew her out to California and spent some time training with her on how to use the hearing aid test drive. And the results, since then kind of speak for themselves. Again, there was a slight dip in 2020 due to COVID, but this young audiologist is well on her way to being quite successful. So as we discussed earlier, the test drive removes a lot of the traditional sales tactics and processes that are customary in this business, and it really empowers the patients to collaborate with their hearing care professional in a way that finds them the right product at the right price point. And with that, I am going to pass it off to Chelsea.
Thanks, Will. Yeah, so just kind of to summarize what you've heard throughout the presentation, and especially in the data that Will showed, the hearing aid test drive widens your sales funnel at every point along the way. So the compelling message that speaks to the new consumer drives more new patients to contact your practice. The type of patient who responds to this marketing is highly qualified and invested in the process, and perhaps more importantly, in your practice. Putting hearing aids on patients during their first appointment means you have more trials out walking. And the process itself, where patients get to try different devices, feel empowered through shared decision-making, and all the while are building relationship and rapport with your practice, ultimately leads to more sales. Our philosophy is that when private practices put patient care and experience at the center and build fortified business models around that, they will succeed, no matter the challenges that arise. Start with patient care and business results will follow. So as we wrap up, I want to read our mission statement, which is, Pivot Hearing stands with private practices because we believe they provide the best patient care, and it is our vision to successfully fortify those practices to thrive in their local markets. The key to your success now and in the future is to develop and communicate compelling reasons why patients should choose you over other competitive alternatives in the market. As you saw today, the hearing aid test drive can be an excellent way to do that. It needs to be coupled with other strong practice fundamentals. And Pivot Hearing does just that for private practices. The hearing aid test drive is just one example of the many impactful, forward-thinking, real-world tools that Pivot Hearing has developed to help private practices compete. And we don't just bring ideas, we also deliver lightning fast execution so your practice can stay one step ahead. We offer practice development services in 3 major categories. Offense, this is how we help you acquire new patients. Defense, these are the ways we help you nurture and engage your existing patient database, as well as defend against any and all competitive threats. And coaching, this is all the other practice management support we deliver to you and your team. As fellow practice owners and seasoned consultants, nobody offers better thinking around what it's going to take for private practices to succeed in the near, medium, and long term. Nobody executes as quickly on the database decisions we help you make, so things get done well, quickly, and move your business forward. The beautiful thing about our model is that working with Pivot Hearing likely won't cost you anything, and it may even save you money. We offer extremely competitive hearing aid pricing. You retain manufacturer perks and benefits that you already have, and there are no contracts, commitments, or minimums. We love the chance to get to know you, your practice, and your market better to see if we can support you and help you grow. So you'll be receiving an email following this event that includes a link where you can schedule a one-on-one meeting with our team. So with that, I am going to move on to the Q&A. So I have a handful of questions here. If you haven't asked your question yet, also just a reminder, you can go ahead and do that now. So here's a question, and I'll let anybody from my team answer these, whoever wants to, but okay, this question is, with the test drive, how often do you get a patient who does a test drive and then decides not to move forward anyways? I don't know, maybe Adam, do you want to take that one?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. So, if I think about this is just kind of a personal, question, anecdotal off the top of my head and people I see. But it's relatively rare. So, sometimes that is going to happen, of course. You're not going to get every single person to get hearing aids through you, even with this process. But it's infrequent enough that when it does happen, I definitely notice it. And I think about, that process and maybe what could have happened differently. And usually I feel okay because I know that I've done everything I could to try to get that person there. So yeah, it's still going to happen. But if you compare it to the alternative of, presenting somebody with an option and them having to buy it on the spot or making it difficult for them to even take the hearing aids home by a steep deposit or something like that. And if they say no to that, proposition, then in my opinion, that's a real potential loss there, because you probably could have made it easier for them to get started. And then once they've actually experienced it, then they'll purchase. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, great. Thanks, Adam. And then here's a question. This person said they may have missed this, but are you trying out different manufacturers in the test drive or just different technology levels?
I can
answer that. No, sure.
It's usually 2 manufacturers. Every once in a while we go to a third, but the patients usually don't want to get any more involved than that, and neither do we. So I would say 2 is the average. But yes, we certainly try different manufacturers, and because there's no way of knowing how that patient's going to respond to one versus the other until they actually get a chance to wear them. So.
Okay, great. Okay, here's a question. Do you take a credit card imprint when the patient goes home with the devices?
We do
I'll
not.
take that one. No, we do not do that. No, we don't require any sort of, credit card or signature or anything like that.
Okay, great. Okay, here's a question. Do you ever cut off the test drive if someone kind of is dragging it out?
Yeah. So there are times where with a certain type of patient who really, maybe they're indecisive or who knows who knows what the circumstances are, but if it's kind of taking too long, going off the rails, and yes, you do need to kind of put some guardrails up to keep that from happening. So certainly as a professional, you need to, use your judgment. And yeah, at some point you could let a patient know that they'll need to make a decision, that you can't keep this going forever, obviously. So yeah, it doesn't happen very often. Most people don't want to come in every week and, for long periods of time to figure out their hearing aids. They kind of want to be done with it as well. But yeah, when it does happen, you just need to use your professional judgment to set some limits, things like that. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, another question popped in here. What is your process if the demo hearing aids are in fact lost by the patient?
So we just we live with that. So we have great relationship with our manufacturers, and everyone is a little bit different, but we can generally get devices replaced at little or small costs to us. We really don't want to put up any sort of barriers to a patient trying hearing aids. So we've worked practices who will will have a small fee if something like that happens, but I think in a perfect world, you don't have anything like that. And if a patient loses a hearing aid for whatever reason, then it's rare enough, and it's not that financially painful because of the fact that it was a demo device, that you just kind of live with it, because the benefits in totality really outweigh little headaches and little hiccups like that.
And if I could just add one thing, I've had a few of those experiences over the years, and usually because the overall process is going so well anyways, those patients, if they lost the demo, I really don't sweat it because they end up buying hearing aids anyways. So, it could happen, but if somebody's having a great experience and they're on the path to purchasing anyways, it really will not matter at the end of the day.
Okay, great. Getting close to time here, but I do have another question. So someone says, we lack selling skills. Would you train us? And if yes, what is your concept and methodology?
Yes, I'd say, reach out to us after this and let's schedule a call, and we'll get into all that. We offer the full suite of, training, everything from selling, patient care, how to get the demos and manage it in your office, the marketing side of it, the whole thing. So definitely let's get in touch.
Okay, great. Those are all the questions we had. So with that, I want to thank everyone again for attending today. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day and look forward to talking with you soon. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.